Well, good morning, boys and girls, and welcome to Bible Story Corner. Today, we're going to talk about the fact that Jesus always loves us. And of course, just like all of our stories, today's story comes from the Bible. And you'll be able to read about this story yourself if you'd like. This one comes from 3 books in the Bible. So that you can know what they are, I'm going to show them to you. This one comes from Luke, chapter 24, verses 50 to 53, and Acts, chapter 1, verses 7 to 11, and Romans, chapter 8, 31 through 39. There we go. Are you ready to get started? Does anyone remember what we talked about last week? If you said Easter, that's exactly right. There's another word for it too, resurrection. So last week we talked about how Jesus died on the cross because of our sins, but that he was also raised by God after 3 days. And so that's called the resurrection. And that's what we celebrate on Easter, right after Passover. So this week we're going to talk about another thing that Jesus did. Now, Jesus really loved his disciples a lot. And after he was resurrected, he spent some time with his disciples. And not just them, but he actually appeared to over 500 people in those days. But he did spend a lot of time with his disciples. Now, the Bible doesn't tell us exactly what they talked about, but I can have a pretty good guess, and I'll bet you could too. Now, imagine if your mom and dad knew that they were going to be leaving, and they were going to be gone for an extended period of time, say a month, who knows. What do you think they would talk to you about? Do you think they would talk to you about the weather or whether your shoes are tied? Probably not. They might talk to you about some important things that they think you need to know while they're gone. That would be my guess, is that while Jesus was with his disciples, because he loved them so much, he spent a lot of time telling them what he thought they needed to know. So he went walking with his disciples outside of Jerusalem and Bethany, and Jesus found a place where he could stop and he could chat with them and tell them what they needed to know. As he gathered his disciples around him, he blessed them so that they would know that he loved them and that he would always love them no matter what. While they were still talking, though, all of a sudden, Jesus began to rise. He rose higher and higher in the clouds. And as he rose, his disciples stared. Of course, wouldn't you think you would stare as well if all of a sudden someone that was talking to you rose? And the disciples didn't know what to think. After they couldn't see Jesus anymore, they still looked up into the sky. And there he rose and rose and rose. But suddenly, 2 angels came, and they spoke to the men. And they said, "What are you looking at?" They said, "Jesus went back to heaven. He'll come back someday." The disciples understood where Jesus went. They knew that he's God's son and that he went back to be with his Father in heaven. The disciples also knew that even though Jesus went back to heaven, he still loved them. And they knew that wherever they went, Jesus would always love them. The disciples were so excited about Jesus and his love for them that they ran back to Jerusalem and went to the temple to worship God. After some days, the disciples began telling people in Jerusalem about Jesus and his love. Imagine, wouldn't you want to do the same? What an exciting story. Then some of the disciples and other people who believed in Jesus started traveling to cities and towns in Israel and around Israel, telling people about Jesus. They wanted everyone to know that Jesus always loves us. Do you know the Apostle Paul believed in Jesus and learned about his love too? God helped Paul write the book of Romans. And Romans chapter 8 tells us that nothing can stop Jesus from always loving us. Even if we're in trouble and in hard times, Jesus always loves us. If we're hungry, Jesus always loves us. Every place we go, Jesus always loves us. Today and every day of our lives, Jesus always loves us. Whatever we do, whether it's good or bad, Jesus always loves us. Nothing can separate us from Jesus always loving us. What a great story, don't you think? Okay, let's talk about some of what we learned in today's lesson. Now, do you remember where Jesus went? That's right, he went back to heaven, where he came from. And what did Jesus do for his disciples before he went up to heaven? This one's a little tougher. He talked with them. He told them what they needed to know. He blessed them. That's right, you got that one. And what did the two angels tell the disciples? They said, no need to look up in the sky. They said, you know what Jesus told you to do. Let's get to doing that. And he told them that Jesus would always love them. Now, what did the disciples do after Jesus went back to heaven? They went to Jerusalem to worship God. And then they started telling everyone what they knew. Do you remember the story and the songs that we sang in the past 2 weeks? Do you remember the stop story that we sang? Stop and let me tell you what the Lord has done for me. Stop and let me tell you what the Lord has done for me. He forgave my sins and he saved my soul. He cleansed my heart and he made me whole. So stop and let me tell you what the Lord has done for me. That's right. That's what Jesus told us to do. Go and tell everyone. Today we're going to sing a song that helps us to remember that Jesus is always with us. And so it goes like this. Jesus is with me, Jesus is in me, Jesus came down to earth one day. Jesus has saved me and he will make me all that he wants for me to be. Yes, yes, I love him too, just like he wants me to. And that is why I cannot stop my singing. Jesus is with me, Jesus is in me, Jesus came down to earth one day. Jesus has saved me and he will make me all that he wants for me to be. Very good. Okay, we'll see you next week, boys and girls.